government wants to create a fairer system of property ownership in England and Wales and end what it's described as rip-off leasehold contracts. Under these contracts, homeowners do not have full ownership of their property, but long-term leases in which they must pay a yearly ground rent over to whoever owns the freehold. Ground rents that can sometimes double every decade and also have extremely high service charges. They want to replace them with something called Commonhold, and that'll mean that homeowners can collectively own the building the flat is in. It's already in use in Scotland. Jane Hewland is a leaseholder living in a block of flats in Canary Wharf in London. She told me about the issues she's faced.
The thing I've learned about leasehold that I didn't know before I bought is, number one, you own nothing. What you own is a tenancy agreement. You also control nothing. The landlord decides what services get provided, by whom, and at what cost. And if you want to challenge that, you have to go to court. And then usually you end up paying his legal fees as well as your own. So that's a dead duck.
And what about the service charge that you're paying? How's that?
Oh, the service charges are unbelievable. This is a building which, unlike many of the newer ones, has no facilities. It has no gardens, nothing. And yet I started off paying around under £12,000 a year. I'm now paying the best part of 30.
And when you look at the budget for what that £30,000 is spent on, what is it being spent on?
We've never yet been able to get to the bottom of that. Also, we don't get to see or have any effect on the budget. We have a new service charge year starting next month. We'll get bills for it next week. And we've not been told what the budget is. We'll just get a bill and be asked to pay.
You didn't know about this then in 2006 when you bought the property?
I didn't go into it in that sort of depth, you see. That's the problem. People think they're being sold the dream of home ownership. I was even stupid enough to use the developer's solicitor suggested by the estate agent. I mean, I was basically taken advantage of. I just walked into it blind, as so many do.
What does it mean for you then to have to pay out £30,000? Can you still afford it?
I'm a fortunate person. I had my own business for a while, but it's eating through my grandchildren's inheritance at a great rate of knots. I'm just hoping that the law will change and people like us will get the right to enfranchise, or at the very least the right to manage our building.
So you're happy then with the government proposals?
I'm very, very nervous because in the short term it's going to make our situation a whole lot worse, because there'll be new estates which will be Commonhold, and those will have obvious commercial advantage over us.
So you'll be hoping that buildings like yours will be taken into account when the government...
Oh, they must be.
That was Jane Hewland. Well, the government is now discussing how best to bring in Commonhold, and they've set up a panel of experts to help them do this. One of those experts is Sebastian O'Kelly. He's head of a housing campaign charity called Leasehold Knowledge Partnership. Sebastian, do you think that Jane's experiences there are common?
Yes, I do. Most people who buy leasehold flats are unhappy at having done so. The Leasehold Advisory Service, the government Quango, found that 57% of purchasers of leasehold properties regretted doing so, and that is echoed by our own experience. It's absolutely woeful that so many people buy flats in England and Wales and end up deeply regretting it and feel that they're being ripped off by anonymous and often offshore private equity landowners or landlords who bought the income streams of their block of flats. And it's been a disgraceful area of residential property for far too long, and it's absolutely right that it's being reformed. So
the government is now starting this reform process. They say it's going to be the biggest change in property law for 40 years and will help, I think it's something like 4.5 million people who have got a flat or a house in which is a leasehold. I mean, it is an enormous change, isn't it?
It is. I mean, for once, the politicians are not resorting to hyperbole. It is correct. I mean, the leasehold was, in its modern form, was invented as a way for Victorian aristocrats to not sell the land for houses that the Victorian middle classes were buying, and it created one Duke of Westminster, but we're well on the way to creating 100 Dukes of Westminster as we build more and more flats in all cities, but particularly London, and use this a leasehold system. Because in creating a leasehold property, you also create an investment asset that is bought by somebody else and who grazes off the revenues of that building. And it's absolutely appalling that the service charges in Jane's Place are so high. Many other people are in the same sort of disempowered position.
So this panel of experts which the government has pulled together, as we said, of which you are one of them, what will you now be doing? Are you sitting down together all discussing how this is going to work, how you're going to move on to Commonhold?
Yes, I mean, the Law Commission produced a report on Commonhold, and Commonhold does exist in this country since 2002, but it wasn't made mandatory, so developers who make much more money out of selling leasehold flats by selling the freehold off to investors in residential freeholds want to continue doing that, or wanted to continue doing that. But Commonhold is a system in the rest of the world, not just in Scotland, in continental Europe, in North America and Australasia. Around the world, the system of selling flats is Commonhold. England and Wales are the anomalies here, not the rest of the world. We've got to stop creating leasehold.
Jane Hewland there is quite worried that she might not be included because her flat is already built. She's already in this system of leasehold.
Yes, it is a good point, but and it is a concern. And it happened in Australia when they introduced Commonhold in Australia in the early 1960s. You know, the leasehold properties will, over some decades, become less attractive, but there are nearly 5 million leasehold properties in England and Wales, so it's going to take some time. I don't think that Jane is correct in thinking that her flat will be immediately disadvantaged because several other blocks of flats are being built with Commonhold tenure. It's going to take decades before leasehold properties are seen as deeply unattractive compared with Commonhold.
Sebastian Kelly, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme today.